The very idea of the death penalty is increasingly being seen by more and more people and governments around the world as something that needs to be abolished and consigned to the dustbin of history. There is an overall trend in that direction. Secondly, there have been some specific developments last year, such as in Iran, the law with regard to narcotics and death penalty was changed, where the amount of drugs you need to be found with for execution was reduced substantially. So that saw a 50% decrease in death penalty, as well as several countries such as Burkina Faso, Malaysia, and the Gambia either issued moratoriums or reduced the threshold for death penalty to be considered. So there have been some very positive trends in the direction that we need to be going, and we hope that it will only be a matter of time since the death penalty is consigned to the dustbin of history. Amnesty International and a range of other civil society partners who've been fighting to abolish the death penalty, I think, can take credit for positive movement in the direction of the ultimate abolishment of the death penalty. Amnesty itself has taken up some specific cases where we've taken the lead, such as the case of Noura Hussein in Sudan. She was being forced into arranged marriage, and the person, while trying to rape her, she responded and he ended up getting killed, and she was convicted to the death penalty. And after Amnesty's intervention in that case, for example, a death sentence was commuted to a 5-year prison sentence. The countries that actually already last year showed negative trends, we should name them, include Japan, Belarus, Thailand for the first time introduced the death penalty since 2009. The Sri Lankan president wants to bring back the death penalty after about 40 years and so on. So these countries are bucking the trend. They need to know that they're going against the flow of history, and that death penalty, firstly, as a deterrence to crime, has been proven over and over again not to work. That we have seen in history people who have been wrongfully committed to the death penalty being executed, and we need to understand that the death penalty is an irreversible act once executed. The fact that we are not able to confirm certain figures is not as a result of not trying, but it's as a result of the lack of transparency by some of the governments, and China, sadly, is the largest executor in the world, and therefore I think they try not to share the numbers. The fact that certain governments are anxious about sharing the numbers is a recognition, in a way, that they themselves know that actually it's not a defendable and defensible position, and that publishing these numbers would invite global criticism, and therefore I think they conceal these numbers. The death penalty is something that humanity should never have started and should have never continued to apply in the way that we do today. There have been far too many people in history who, through bad police work or through political interference and so on, have unjustly lost their lives when they were absolutely innocent. We also know there are many cases in the United States, for example, a country that prides itself on being, one of the best legal systems in the world, where people have spent, almost 3 decades on death row, and then DNA results now are vindicating them. And for any state to take the risk of destroying people's lives for no apparent reason, when in fact the very act of the death penalty does not offer the deterrence to reduce crime and so on, seems unjust, unfair, and unethical. We need to recognize that the death penalty equals inhumane, degrading, and unjustifiable punishment, and For all of those reasons, Amnesty International will continue to add its voice and campaign on the death penalty until it is consigned to the dustbin of history. In 2018, it was deeply disappointing to see Singapore, Japan, Belarus, South Sudan, as well as Thailand, where we've not seen any executions since 2009, increase in their numbers. We say to these countries that recognize firstly that the death penalty has been recognized by the overwhelming majority of countries in the world to be a cruel, inhumane, and degrading punishment. Secondly, the death penalty has proven beyond reasonable doubt that it is not a deterrent to crime of whatever nature, and that the history has shown that human error, whether in the criminal justice system, whether it's in policing and so on, does lead to innocent people being convicted and sentenced to death or left for decades on death row.